You're watching CHCO-TV's gavel-to-gavel coverage of the February 25th, 2026 Special Council meeting for the Town of St. Andrews. I'm Florence Mitchell. In this meeting, Council will receive a presentation from Fundy Engineering on their assessment of the structure of the Market Wharf. Now let's join Council in the W.C. O'Neill Arena Complex Council Chambers in St. Andrews.
Okay, Council, we will call together the Town of St. Andrews Special Council meeting on Wednesday, February the 25th at 2026 at 5 p.m. at the W.C. O'Neill Arena Complex Council Chambers. So the first thing is the recording of attendance. All members are present except for Mark Blanchard. He's not here tonight and he's not online, so he's absent. But everybody else is here. Staff is here, and we have our presenters here. We are on the land of the Beskoto-Makati people, the unceded traditional territory of the Passamaquoddies or the Beskoto-Makati people. We need an approval of the agenda, so the recommended motion is this, that the 26/02/25 special meeting of council agenda be approved as presented, and I need a mover and a seconder. Mover, Councillor Heenan. Seconder, Deputy Mayor Neal. Any additions or errors? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Contrary minded? Carried. Disclosure of a conflict of interest? I don't think there is anybody tonight. And now we are up to presentations, and we are looking to the Fundy Engineering report on the wharf. So I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. First, I'm going to do just a little bit of an overview of the report. I'm pointing out
Sorry,
some...
Gordon, can you maybe introduce yourselves?
Oh, sorry.
We're on
Yeah.
Gordon Mullen from Fundy Engineering. And this will give us a little bit of an overview that I will bring up some of the more pertinent things in our condition survey. Bit of background, the St. Andrews Wharf was built and rebuilt in stages between 1960 and 1990, and some repairs done in 2010. The three sections of the wharf were the head of the wharf, out where the floats are, the outer approach road, which is next working in towards the shore, and then the inner approach road section. Plus, we have two seawalls, one for the market area and one for the day adventure area. So I'm going to start at the head of the wharf because that's the one that's in most need of attention immediately, that and the inner approach road. So the piles support concrete vents and the reinforced concrete deck, which is in good condition. The steel H piles are driven in the harbor bottom to bedrock through, in some places, the remnant of the old wharf that was built in 1960 and was partially burnt. Near the mud line, the piles are in very poor condition. Didn't expect it. And these need immediate structural repairs. So this is something that needs to be done, in our opinion, this year. We also would recommend that the section of the wharf that is adjacent to the day adventure gangway, that is the areas of most concern, and we're recommending that we limit the traffic in that area. Like, just don't take the chance of saying, oh, only pickup trucks, because that doesn't mean somebody else can't come out with a loaded vehicle and park it in the exact same spot that we had the dive team park. But we hadn't seen the piles until we did the dive team thing. Those piles are severely compromised in the steel area, which means that they don't have the same capacity that they originally had. So we do have, and that's in the report, is what that structural pile repair would look like. Also, at the top of the piles in the splash zone, this is up above high water level or near high water level, they're in poor condition, but I think they can wait until year 2 and just use standard grout-filled fiberglass wrap jackets. So then going inward, the outer approach road is founded on wooden piles. I'm driven into the harbor bottom through some dense sand, probably stopping on the bedrock. Those are in good conditions, but they're at a stage in their life cycle where they do require some maintenance. And that would be grout-filled fiberglass jackets in the areas, not the whole pile, but in the areas that we have concern, and it varies from 1 meter in length to 3 meters in length. And that would be, again, something that would be done in year 2. The inner approach road, I forgot, there's some cross bracing that needs to be done in the outer approach road. It's in poor shape, but it's something we see doing over the next 3 to 4 years, and then reassess it at that point and see if there's additional that needs to be done. There's some that are in place and intact, and others that are just hanging in the wind. So it's it's a maintenance item, but it is probably should be considered a capital project.
Just one thing, John McKelvey, Fund Engineering. Just one thing to add to that note is there has been repairs done on the cross bracing before, but the hardware used was either low-grade galvanized or just clear steel, and that's caused a lot of the issue with erosion. Some of them are disconnected. So some of the cross bracing are actually fine, but the hardware has actually failed and then caused failure in the pile too as well. So that's just a note on that as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's good, John. Thank you. So the inner approach road is basically built out of wooden trestles that are founded on bedrock. We actually did some test bits to confirm that. So the wooden posts just sit directly on the rock. There's no footing. And it has been repaired over the years. I think 2010 was a date that was used, where new wood posts and cross members were sistered onto the existing, and additional galvanized steel gusset plates were added to keep it in decent shape. And the trestles actually are not that bad a shape, but what they hold up, the deck above, it's a composite deck of concrete sitting on timbers on edge, and there's some reinforcing in the concrete deck, but it's about as big as my little finger. It's not very big at all. And so if it starts to corrode, there's not a lot left if it is corroding, and we've seen on the edges that this has happened. And one of the areas of concern is that there's a big asphalt patch that's down to probably the reinforcing steel, and if there's water getting at it, that reinforcing steel is not in good shape. And we need to check that probably in the spring before the season starts to see if there's anything that has to be done to remediate the deck on the short term. So and one of the reasons that the deck is deteriorating is age, and it has an alkali aggregate reactivity problem. So what happens is the cementitious material in the concrete and the aggregate itself have a reaction, and that reaction produces a chemical that occupies more volume than the original constituents. And when it occupies more volume, it causes to expand. And when it expands, it will pop aggregate out and cause just a slow deterioration of the concrete. And there's some pictures in the report that shows that. If we get down to that detail, I can point out how that happens. It's the same sort of thing when you have a piece of steel and it rusts. the rust occupies more space than the original steel did. And if it has nowhere to go, it causes forces that cause the deck to deteriorate. This is exactly what's happening to the Mactaquac Dam. Same problem, exactly the same problem.
So just another note to add on that one too, is that's just the deterioration, the crumbling of what you see when you walk out, and which has caused I assume, the asphalt patch before. That rebar, when it rusts, again, what Gord says, it expands, but it really, when that exposure of that structural steel happens, that's where it starts being aggressive on when it's gonna start deteriorating, because it basically, everybody knows, everybody owns a house here, that when water gets in, it's very aggressive and it keeps leaking in, and that's expanding, especially with our environment, especially with this environment with the freeze-thaw cycle, exposure with a lot of areas, and salt air, it just really starts deteriorating quickly. So what we see is bad, what's under it is probably just as bad, we just don't see it.
So the second main thing to do this year is what we're recommending, is to start to do the supports for the new deck. We can't put a new deck over the old trestles because, they are end of life, basically. They might have a few more years in it, but it's not cost effective. So what we're suggesting is that in between alternating trestles, we will put in the footings and the superstructure underneath the existing deck, try and get another year out of the existing deck, and then the following year before your season starts, put a new deck on and get yourself back up to something that is usable as opposed to something that is basically not that safe. So that would be the two main things that we saw that would occur in this year and the first thing next year. And then there are other things that we can do beyond that. So,
Sorry, just 1 second before we move into the walls. Going back to the structural section of the inner approach, doing the foundation work and the underneath trestles, again, it's a main focus which we've talked quite a bit about in previous meetings, is limiting the impact of any of this construction work during peak season of the area. So the work of the foundations can all be done at basically sea level during tidal peak times. And all that can be done. So then when it gets to a phase of redecking the wharf, you can look at doing that in phases, or, a chunk of time where you know that, limit access to the wharf is needed. So it's trying to do a workaround so we don't just basically put up barriers and say, no, we can't use a wharf for 3 months, whatever period of time. So doing it this way is kind of, we can talk about a little bit more in detail. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. That's the purpose of doing that. That's why we're looking at. So if there's any quick questions about it, it's doing the foundation so that wharf continues to operate as much as possible.
Yep. So we also considered, because we were asked to consider, come up with at least one solution or two solutions, I think it was. So one of the things we considered as another solution for the inner approach road would have been a segmented block wall or a ready rock style wall that would actually be a wharf structure. It wouldn't be just a wall. It'd be basically 3 walls, one at the end and all the way down the sides. That is different than your typical wharf structure, with piles or columns and a wharf over it. It's a solid piece. But it has a long lifespan too, so that's another thing to consider. So those are the two alternates there. Then we get into the market and the day adventure seawalls. The day adventure seawall is constructed with square timber cribs, treated timber. It looks like it probably has got some free draining materials behind it. The worst part of the day adventure wall is the top 2 meters. I'm not exactly sure why, but the top 2 meters are starting to lean, and the bottom of the wall is not as bad. However, it's it's not at its end of life, but it's, you know, it's in the next few years, it may get there. So that's something to consider when trying to decide whether to do a short-term fix on the top 2 meters or do the whole thing and step out in front and put new cribs or a ready rock wall or whatever in front of it. And there's 4 options there. So the Market Wharf is constructed of different types of timber, but again, it's timber cribs. Appears to have some ballast. The cribs themselves are failing when you're down there beside them. They're actually leaning to seaward. The ends of the timbers are rotten, that are the tie-back timbers that keep the wharf from falling over. It's not in imminent failure mode yet, but you certainly wouldn't want to take that into the future. So that needs to be replaced either with more timber cribs or the alternative is a ready rock type of wall. Because of the way it was constructed, and it's in the report, there is a area where the brick has subsided, where the soil's underneath it. When the tide goes in and out, it's taking some more and more soil out from underneath those bricks because of the permeability of the stone and the rock that was used for ballast in those cribs. So that will have to be repaired, that'll have to be dug up and repaired, bricks removed, and then at this point, all we were assuming is that once the underneath part was fixed, we'd just put the bricks back in place. That is something that I think you guys will have to, you'll have to decide. Where do you want to go with the finish in the market area? Do you want to continue to use brick? If we expand the area, again, do we want to expand brick, or is there something else you'd like to do? I don't want to spend too much time on the brick, but bricks normally are meant for buildings, not for ground surfaces. I know that they were used in St. John extensively on the sidewalks. But they don't have the same freeze-thaw resistance that concrete pavers have. The concrete paver design would have a lot more longevity, wouldn't settle as much if it was all done, if the underpinnings of it were all done and designed properly, and can take moderate snow plowing, where I don't know how you manage to do the snow clearing on those bricks right now, but I'm sure it's an issue. So the other thing that we did, and it starts on drawing C1.1, is the general outline of the wharf, and then when you get to C1.5, that's where we get into the first of 3 options for the area. The first option is a large area that lines up with the Day Adventure seawall and creates a lot of extra space. And there are options of either hybrid wall with rock fill and either crib or ready rock over the top, or full height crib or ready rock wall for a facing. And then the second option is about half the size, but does create more space for the market area and or other activities that, you know, I don't know what the demand is in the area, but maybe there's other activities that it could be used for. And then the last one is basically just building out in front of the existing seawall without taking up too much area. And there is a building on there now on stilts, and I would assume that would go back in approximately the same spot with that or the other 2 options. So one of the things that we're trying to do here too is it's shown on the first option, option 1. It's shown on the third option, and it's not shown on the second option. but instead of replacing the inner approach road section with new trestles and concrete deck, which is quite expensive, the thought is that we would just put in a seawall to take the place of that amount of bridge work, and then start the inner approach from that point on to meet up with the outer approach area and replace it, which has considerable savings and less maintenance, and is just a much more viable option. So that was the structural part of my summary. The last part, two parts. One was the load limit of the deck, and I don't think we're in a position until the spring, and we have a look at what the deck looks like in that fairly poor area, as to whether we can still maintain the 9,000 kilograms as a allowable load on the wharf. The second area, of course, is what I talked about with the H-piles being corroded to a very thin cross-section. If we can get the inner approach road up to 9,000 kilograms, and we barrier off that bad section of the outer wharf, of the head wharf, then we could probably get back to the 9,000 kilograms in the short term until all the repairs are made and the new inner approach is done, et cetera. So the very last thing was sea level rise. The question was asked, and we determined that the sea level rise over the next 30 years would be about 0.4 meters. That would allow for some storm surge plus the sea level rise, and I think that's probably about as far as you need to go with that. It may increase in the future. However, in 30 years, you may be having to look at replacing the whole outer head structure, and maybe even the outer approach road. So can't see that far into the future, but that would be sort of my long-term view. One of the other reasons why I think it's a good idea to replace that inner approach road inside the day adventure area with a wall and infill is that could be, if the new inner approach road structure is brought up 0.4 meters, on the short term, you could have that ramp up to the structure. At the other end, we'll have to also have a ramp down to the outer approach section of the wharf over a distance that won't cause, cars and trucks to bottom out as they go up and down. Be a super long speed bump, I guess. And then in the future, if you want to do something with the whole market area and day area, perhaps you bring those up to the sea level rise recommendation, or you can do it all now. But that's a question I think I can make a recommendation, but I think it needs the input of the council on a lot of these options. They're out there, and this is where I'm going to step back and you guys can fire away a question. That's about, unless you had something, Madam Mayor, that's where we are.
All I was going to add to that is if you're looking at the options for the facing for the proposed infill areas in section C 1.3 to 5, the infill options are on C 3.1. So just you can see the hybrid option of, partial crib, partial rock infill. full crib work or full ready rock wall or partial hybrid wall options too. So just, if you don't know where they are, they start in C 3.1, and that kind of shows the options of what the facing of those three proposed alignments would look like. So just so you know where the information's at.
Yeah. Plus all the cost estimates are there too that would have to be part of your, your considerations when you're looking at what you'd like to build, so.
Thank you.
Okay.
Council? Mr. Spear?
Thanks. I just had, I guess, a couple of three questions, Gordon, to get things started while council absorbs it all. Under your estimates for year one, you have the inner approach replacement as the trestle for 872,000. But I think you had mentioned in passing that you could also do like a fill-in approach instead of,
On the very inner end of it, yes.
so is that built into the 872, or is that just with the concrete piles?
That would be built into, using a fill-in for the inner part, and then an actual concrete trestle structure between that abutment and the outer approach road.
Essentially up to where Market Square ends,
Right, yeah.
So
Or
just,
Day Adventure ends.
or Day Adventure ends?
Yeah.
yeah, so it just depends what that alignment of that
Yeah.
infill area. So that
Yeah.
suggests how much the trestle area depends on, because it's the length of we'd have to go along. So it kind of again goes back to what the infill area would be.
And that number 872, that is only for the foundation part of it. The deck and everything is on the next page in year two. Phase 2 inner approach, trestle deck, 1.2.
So, I guess not being a contractor, how would you do the trestle replacement underneath without doing the deck on top?
Well, the rock is down about 4 feet. So you would put some foundations on rock. We haven't worked out the details, but there's room in between to excavate it, put in your foundations, put in your columns, your top of your columns, and then leave it till the next year. And then when you're ready, take the old deck off and put a new deck on. The new deck would be precast, pre-stressed panels, about 25 feet long. And they would just go in with a crane, drop them on, and then put a 8-inch concrete slab, or reinforced concrete slab over the top as a wear surface, and your curbing and other things that you want to put on.
So just to kind of visualize that a little bit more, it'd
It's like
be,
a Lego,
yeah, so it would be in between the existing trusses there are now. Gord's mentioned the 25-foot span. So we can look at, instead of doing the kind of chunked precast panels that are there now, we can look at pushing that out for whatever the engineering limit would be on those. So what you do is you dig down, build the foundations, then the steel frames would come up underneath. You'd support it, so you could do all the work underneath, leave the deck. So then you just peel the deck off. So it's like, it's kind of funny because it looks like you're building a truss of the roof underneath the roof. So when you pull the roof on, you can just put a new one on. So it's kind of, hopefully that makes it a little bit more visual on what's going to happen there, and that's what keeps it moving. So then you're just limited of time of when you actually have to shut it down to redo the deck. And then you can do the deck in portions. You put a panel down or two
Or you can
panels
do the
down.
whole, with a good contractor, you should be able to take the deck off. Everything's there to set the new deck on, and be back in service in a number of months, probably starting in late winter. And then finish it up before you get into the May, June period, so.
So, with that in mind then, is it going to be more expensive because of the labor cost of working underneath and then doing the deck? Or, and this is just a what-if scenario, if we did everything in year one, would we see overall savings because they don't have to mess around as much?
There might be some, because the demolition cost, when I did the demolition cost, I actually added an extra amount because the demolition will be have to be a little bit more delicate. It'll have to be cut, slung out of the way, and transported away. So it wouldn't be just a matter of taking a backhoe out and bashing the heck out of it and loading in a truck. So, yeah, we did look at the demolition cost to speak to your concern. But it does, as John said, take up less of your high demand time. That's what we're trying to avoid. There might be a small premium, like I say, for that because of demolition and working underneath, but it might be worth it.
So if we go with the concrete trestles, I guess under your plan, there won't be any loss of service except until you do the decking?
That would be hopefully the solution. The result of that type of solution is that less downtime during your peak requirements.
So there might be some downtime, but it might be like a morning or maybe a day if they have to bring in a crane to do something. But
Yeah.
it's more a manageable period of time than to just strip everything out, pour all the foundations. Because again, we are dealing with title limitations really on that one too,
Well-
on work periods. So, you strip it in phases and then doing foundation phases, then you basically have that gaping hole that you're kind of tied to Mother Nature on that one. So doing it in this phase section of it, you can do the foundations within the tidal periods. You might be able to space out the work, like say there might be a 2-week window where it's extremely high tides and you can't do it. It's not going to just still keep the wharf shut down and no work's happening on it.
Yeah.
So it allows you a little bit more flexibility on work time.
No, that's good.
You can,
'cause-
you can use the wharf while you're doing this work underneath.
And that's perfect, because I was more worried not for a few hours here and there. I was thinking there might be periods of like 2-3 weeks or months.
Yeah, there might be
where
a
our
week-
winter users have to, find alternate
Yeah.
locations, so, but if we get
When-
that far.
When the
When-
deck isn't being installed, yeah, you're cut off. When the deck's being installed, I think you might as well start it and finish it.
Agreed.
It could be late winter, early spring, yeah.
But you said it was precast too, right? So,
The precast you could put on, but given the exposure, you couldn't really pour you couldn't cast and pour the deck itself unless the weather was much better because there's no protection. There's very, very difficult to protect the concrete from the underside.
And also you get into a lot of, so that's why when Gord mentioned about like late winter, early spring, because then the concrete work can be done in the warmer section of it, but the panels can be placed, I don't want to say in a snowstorm like this conditions, but less hindrance to that. Because then when you get into pouring concrete in colder weather, you have to work at heat. And it's not like a normal slab where we're pouring a concrete building where you only have to heat the top surface of it. You're going to get cool penetrations from all 4 sides of the concrete slab. So you're going to have to look at a little bit of that too as well. So that's going to be another play on it. So that's why when we think about stripping it all out and doing it all, we can do, if we look at it doing this kind of phase work with foundations and the framework underneath, you basically take, 2/3 of the project with the wharf still functioning. And then the last third, that's when you're going to have to, really look at the utilization and figure out where we can close it down for a period of time to do that last section instead of it being closed down for that whole
yep.
whole
So,
section.
and what would that period of time be, do you think, for the decking, if we do it? Phase 1 this year is recommended, and Phase 2, just, even, I'd rather have a really high-end estimate.
Yeah, I think you'd probably need to, 5 to 6 months, and it could be as little as 3, so. But as John points out, if we tried to do the concrete during cold weather, if everything goes right, perfect, but it doesn't always work out that way, so you don't want to run the risk of putting a whole bunch of money into something that then, 20 years from now, it starts to deteriorate because the concrete froze or, so.
Or the ground wasn't thawed correctly, to be able to pour a slab on. There's situations like that play, and especially in a moist environment that we're working with down there too. It comes into a lot of play, and and my experience is anything that you're going to deal with water, you're going to have a bunch of problems. So if you can limit a factor or to as much as you can of weather, then that's going to help. So if you try to do it over a winter, there's going to be a lot of problems when you're fighting with heat. And that's just one little kind of tidbit,
So, but the decking, that first component before the pour, should be put in warm weather too, so we wouldn't be able
Well, that's what
to put the 5 or 6 months.
Right.
Like, assume, yeah,
But
but
it
so
can
we'd
be
have to
done in
start,
your
like,
high-
in your recommendation, we'd just have to start like no later than no earlier, sorry, than mid-March or something?
Probably April for, doing the excavations, forming it up and start to pour concrete. It can be done during the high season because you're working underneath. People can still do overhead.
No, but we're talking the decking when.
Oh, the decking. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. No, it would probably be more like, I would think, 1st of March, something like that. You could start to, well, even before that, start to do your demolition, get that out of the way so that you can probably start the 1st of March to put your precast panels on.
yeah. So you're looking at like a,
March, April to put your precast panels on, and then you've got April, May, the last part, April, May, to put your deck on and pour your deck, so.
Yeah, and I'm not, okay, so, and I'm not, just so everyone, because the timing thing's a big thing for us. So, like you talked about 5 or 6 months before, but that was just for the underneath work then, I'm assuming.
That would probably be that's the underneath work, but then, the worst scenario would be 5 months to do the decking, and I just can't see that. It's gonna be, probably more like 3 months. And, because there is some other things that we have to discuss too, there are details as we get into the design side of things, is what do you want in the way of railings and stuff.
So kind of an idea, just to kind of break it out a little bit, is if you're doing it as a whole, you'd be roughly around a 9 months period.
Yeah, probably.
That the wharf would be completely shut down.
Yeah.
And doing it in this kind of modified way, you're really only 3 to 4 months shut down completely for the wharf. Off-season period of time. So again, what Gord said is, say at 1st of February, you can start doing your demolition, and demolition could take, say, a month, and then you're working into March.
Yeah.
And then when you get into March a little bit more, you can start doing the foundation work of it, and then,
Well, the foundation's already done.
oh, sorry, not the foundation,
Do
sorry,
the precast deck.
precast deck, and then once we pour the top deck on it, then that's when you're looking at the April, May section of period of time, so.
So my only other concern then and I'm not a trucker, but you have the weight restrictions on the roads to bring cranes down. Will that be a concern that time of year? It shouldn't be.
Not for, if you're looking at placing the deck March, when does the weight restrictions come on? That's a good question. I always think about that.
Probably April.
Yeah, so you can probably,
Let's get it down here.
get it down here, yeah, get a
Sit
crane
in the public
mobilized and
works
do it.
yard. Yeah,
You
okay.
can throw them off.
So your main highways don't have the weight restrictions, and I'm not sure about your highway between the
I think, yeah, the 127 I think does.
These can be stored, like, so if the prefab panels like this, and they're only 25 feet long, I mean, they're not a small structure, but I'm sure they can be stored off campus somewhere in the town. And then that's something you can look at too if you're worried about weight restrictions, is bringing them in at a period of time and then have them set. So then you're just mobilizing them a small distance to site.
Otherwise, you're gonna pay a bit of a premium for transportation because you can only maybe move 6 panels instead of 12 on a truck.
Yeah. No, and that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So, thank you, council. Sorry, I hogged the
Okay.
first 5 minutes.
Yep.
Okay, council, anyone else?
Yeah, I made a few notes here as you were talking. Maybe I'll quickly go through those and then I'll comment on the other, or ask questions on the other thing. So the delamination on the inner approach was basically because it was asphalt on concrete, which I've never heard being done.
No, it's not the asphalt and concrete, other than that there is a big asphalt patch where the concrete had deteriorated, and because of the alkali reactivity, and it had deteriorated to the point where it was a fairly deep hole, and the patch was some asphalt, which is not uncommon to do a patch with asphalt, but it's just indicative of a potential problem that could be quite serious, and we need to look at it before we get into the public and general use and heavy use.
Well, no,
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
think my experience has always been put concrete on concrete.
Yeah, concrete would be, much better, yeah. Yeah.
It's makes sense. The other thing, you mentioned the pile jackets, and you were talking about doing just the hourglass sections on the piles,
On
as
the
opposed to doing the entire pile at
Yeah.
once.
Because there is some sacrificial anodes that need to be kept up, but this hourglassing was on the whole just below the sacrificial anodes, and so there probably, well, there has to be, it'll be part of what we do, is come up with a new design for the sacrificial anodes so that they're properly covered, and or put some mud around it, anything to keep the oxygen away from the steel,
Yeah.
so that it doesn't rust.
Yeah.
And so the sacrificial anode design would have to be improved, and that'd be something we do as part of the structural fix. Okay.
And I guess the other comment I wrote down was, how many meters are you using as a splash zone?
So the bottom repairs, the structural ones, are approximately 2 meters in length or in height, and the splash zone, it varies depending on where we are in the structure, but it would be anywhere from, again, 1 to 2 meters, and it's really pretty much above the high tide level to the deck level. In almost all of them, it's up to the deck level, and so again, it's about 2 meters, maybe 2.5 meters. So
Lots of times I use the whole pile as a splash zone.
yeah,
It's
Yeah.
effectively
yeah.
getting splashed as the tide goes in and out, so.
And if it's protected with the anodes, though, it can really save the steel a lot of erosion.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I like your approach on putting the trestle in first. I think there will be problems. You know, you get the excavation done to put a footing in, and suddenly you get a high tide and
With wave
some
action.
wind, wave action, and
I know. Yeah.
tide goes out and your hole's gone, filled in. But
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll come up with something to alleviate that to a certain point.
Well,
But
I'm-
what I'm envisioning is that you would put your footings in, then you would put your support piles in, and then,
Yeah, so you're right. The sequence, you have to be careful because of tide and winds. So you would do an excavation, you'd put in your formwork and your steel that would connect to the columns and pour it all in one tide. And so you'd have to do them one at a time. And it may not be a complete strip footing across the trestle underneath the deck. It may be just individual footings at the outer edges. The rock will support it. We just have to get the structural guys to give us what they need, and then design the foundations accordingly. And there are some good contractors around that know how to work on the tides.
yeah.
Yeah.
And why I like that approach so much is the foundation is truly a foundation, sitting on bedrock.
Yeah, not just a post sitting on bedrock, I know. I was really surprised when I dug down and there was no foundation.
But you don't get a better foundation
Than
that.
rock, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So this way, just going on again to build on that, we're basically setting this up for longevity. So whatever happens on the outer approach or the head of the wharf, we have a good solid foundation. So whatever continues on from that, we're not worried about this section. So doing it this way, we don't like. There will be there'll be some maintenance on the top wear surface of the deck, but hopefully not in any of our lifetimes we really have to worry about the inner approach road anymore, or at least till we're retired. So so that's kind of a portion of it to do it that way. And when Gord talked about the whole strip footing across, just for if anyone wants to think about it, it's going from basically the whole width of it That would be one kind of strip footing or grade beam. The other one would just be like kind of just blocks on each side. So it just depends on what kind of, how big of a footprint structural engineer for the load we want to look at it. I mean, we have approximately 1,500 by 1,500, so we're talking, you know, a 5 foot by 5 foot, whatever, footprint. But if it needed to be more, then that would be looking at, I mean, we're kind of in a little bit of the nitty gritty in the design here, but then we would look at cost effective would it be to have two big separate foundations or just to have one continuous foundation underneath of it. But again, like Gord said, it would be that phase process, that it is a slow process. It's one at a time. The tides, everything's going to fight you on these ones, but doing it this way, it's a little bit of a slow battle, but then it's done. And then you pour the columns on top of it afterwards. So you have exposed rebar there for a little bit, but then it'll get poured and go from there. So anyways, just a little bit more information on that, so.
The other reason to pick this concept is that it can be done with local labor. It doesn't involve any sophisticated equipment. Basically a small excavator and carpenters and, you know, people that you can actually obtain locally.
Just one more thing to add on, the structural steel that probably go in these foundations, so the cages, most likely these would be able to just either be built off campus by a steel tire. It wouldn't have to be kind of, you're not working with, you know, concrete pourers, carpenters, and steel tires. These cages can probably be done and then just popped in place and then set and poured. So it's not, the process can be a little bit quicker when we're doing this, so.
Yeah, the mats would be all pre-tied and dropped into place. The steel that connects the columns to the footings could be tied in place in a matter of half an hour tops, and then you pour the concrete.
Yeah.
So.
One
Councillor
other thing
Henry?
you mentioned, doing things off campus and the roads closing. 127 does not close down Spurs Port when the roads close, so.
Oh, yeah. So you could come in 127, partway, yeah.
We'll call that strategic routing, is what we'll call that, so.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Heenan?
Well, first off, gentlemen, great news, great presentation. I appreciate all the information. And John, you know me well. I don't have an engineering degree, so. But my big concern, and it always has been, is the public safety. Gord mentioned about putting a railing, et cetera. That to me is the top priority because I find right now kids running, et cetera, I really quite worry about them falling off. And so the public safety is my first and only concern. Everyone has heard me say this over and over again, but I'll tell you, gentlemen, I kayaked under it 2 years ago, and I've not been on the wharf since. So I'm just telling you, from a non-engineering point, I've kayaked under it, and I said, so I've not been on it since. So this shows that we have to get going, and we also have to get going on safety issues before something happens, and it will be unregrettable. So thank you, gentlemen. It was great. Thank you.
And I think where it's a new build, that is probably something that, it's one thing when you have an old wharf, you know, and it's been there for years and everybody's always done it that way. Due diligence is there, but your due diligence where you're doing a new structure, I think is probably, it's probably important to make those decisions the right ones.
So
Thank you.
Just building on that, the guardrails, the existing ones are there. We did notice that when we were doing our initial inspection, that when they installed the existing railing that's there, you know, it's a 4-bolt pattern in the bottom of it, and that's drilled through the concrete, but unfortunately it's also drilled through the wood structure as well, and then through it, which obviously allows seepage to get through there. And that causes some deterioration on the edges, the outer edges of the structure too as well. So, yeah, again, when it comes to new designs, it can be definitely something more elaborate than that. We did talk about some other safety features, just we did mention, about a fire water line going out at one time too. So there's just been some considerations of that too as well. So thank you for bringing it up. And it is something we have noticed, so it's something that we'd have to take into consideration more in the final design. So,
Thank you. Anyone else? Council? Okay, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, again, first off, thank you guys. It's been great working with you so far. I do appreciate the report. Again, to me, it's a very thorough report. It's nice to actually see the condition of the wharf as it is today, see what we're dealing with. I do appreciate the options. Again, I know we asked for several different options to present to the public and whatnot. I just wanted to point out a couple things, I guess, for the public that are listening. Again, what really stood out to me is within the three options, as opposed to what we were working with before, where the level of infill was related to the price in the sense that the more we infilled, the lower the cost was. Whereas the approach you guys have where that outer or the inner approach really doesn't change within all three options. So it's actually the opposite this go around, where as we reduce the infill, it actually gets cheaper for us. So I just wanted people to be aware of that. And again, the one thing I just wanted to point out, again, was with regards to the boat ramp, which I know we've talked about previously, but just so people are aware that the boat ramp in all of these options does remain.
Yep.
So that beach access will always be there. It just simply moves the boat ramp out a little bit farther than it currently is, which to me, again, is not a bad thing because it actually makes it a little bit more usable as far as the tides go, so.
yes, so that was just a couple things that we talked about is, the aesthetics of in this infill. It's a wharf. We don't want to create it into a breakwater. That utilization of space, that helps to kind of a balance with replacing a new deck. And we just looked at the minimum of that and what needs to be done. But again, with the boat ramp, yeah, we had a good conversation last time we met about that. And it is a very valuable asset, and having something more, I don't want to say substantial, but a little bit more engineered than what's currently there is beneficial to everybody. I mean, wharf maintenance, public access. So it's just a win-win. So yeah, that's a very key point that may have potentially been overlooked, but the importance of keeping that is very vital in all these. So again, yes, whatever we do with our alignment, there's always going to be a boat ramp there.
Right.
And it wasn't really part of the original scope, but what I envisage is that it would actually have some sort of a surface, probably concrete.
Yeah.
It could be, you can get these things articulated blocks that are connected with wires and whatever, or a port in place, especially because we have a good place to do it with the tide range that we have. And then protected on the sides with larger rock to make sure wave action doesn't take it out, because I know from experience in St. John, there was some ramps put in near Long Wharf, so you could launch boats. And the first one was made out of asphalt, and it lasted about a year and a half. We'll have to make some sort of design recommendation for that ramp. So yeah.
I think it should be clear that although it's called a boat ramp, I mean, people won't be launching
It's an access.
motorboats as an access point for, and maybe people walk down kayaks and stuff. Even on that side, the water level's so low, even at the extreme high tides, you'd have to only probably get 1.5 feet of between the bottom and the top of the water. So
Yeah.
we're not expanding to, what's that?
No, but that's, again, we're pushing it out farther, actually makes it more usable.
But I know that you recently, over the last little while, more have a designated boat launch a little bit farther down. So that's a priority one. This would be more for,
Day adventure.
day adventure, walking, any kind of emergency, if something needs to be deployed there too as well. So yeah, it would never want to become a primary boat access,
No.
but it would be something that's at least a secondary option.
Kayaking.
Yeah, kayaking, yeah.
But as John mentioned earlier, it also allows for access, because we have in our proposal, ongoing maintenance with pile jackets. As time goes by, more piles it'll become necessary to fix more piles. So having access like that, instead of having to work from the wharf and climb down ladders and that sort of thing like we had to do over at Bayside, the land's right there, walk on it.
Yeah.
It'll save you considerable money having that access for future repairs.
Yeah, it's kind of front end loaded in a way
Yeah.
that you spend the money to have it.
Yeah.
Because you'll be craning or doing whatever, it's just gonna cause more.
Blocking off the wharf.
Yeah, it's just gonna cause more access, so.
Yeah.
Councillor Harland?
Thank you for the presentation. It's going to take me a while to digest it. This is not, this does not come easy to me.
Mhm.
But can you just help me understand the question of sea level rise again? So,
Yeah.
does what you're recommending in terms of the wharf itself, does it meet the condition of sea level rise? What I thought I heard you say was the potential additions to Market Square and the Day Adventure, that would account for sea level rise. Is that correct?
Well, so I'll back it up a little bit. And so sea level rise is determined using a tool that the federal government has put out. And it's specific to certain region, to different regions, like we did one over in Digby. And it's different there. The sea level rise prediction in 30 years is 0.6 meters.
Okay.
Okay. And so if we build the new inner wharf to accommodate sea level rise of 0.4 meters, then the other structures will be lower by that same amount. So we'll have to have a transition zone from the new inner approach wharf to the existing approach wharf.
Right.
And the same thing, some sort of a ramp to whatever is where the market structure and the day adventure areas are. They could be raised at some time in the future. But we're building a structure that's going to last for a long time. It's probably, this structure could probably last for 40, 50 years. So we have to be mindful of sea level rise. As the other structures become unusable or past their life cycle and they're replaced, then they would be raised to the same level. And the same with the market area. It could be left where it is for now, but eventually it would be prudent to raise it to that 0.4 meters. And the reason for it is because those areas will flood. So if what's in those areas can flood, water comes in, water covers it, water goes out. When it happens occasionally with storm surges, that's not an issue. But as sea level rise comes up, it'll start to occur more often. The storm surges don't have to be as large for the occurrence to happen. So it just it gets to the point where it is a problem. Your wharf right now has a structure at the end of it, with washrooms and things like that. Mm-hmm. If you had a big hurricane with big sea level rise from storm surge, on top of just the ordinary 0.4 meters of sea level rise, it all compounds into that structure to get wiped out. So it becomes a little bit of a value thing. You could probably afford to have that structure wiped out every 30 years or 20 years and build it back than to bring that outer wharf up immediately. I wouldn't go to the expense of raising that up right now, because that would be millions and millions of dollars to do that for something that may or may not occur in the next 20 years. It could happen tomorrow. I don't know. The trouble with these 20-year predictions or 30-year predictions is that it could happen within the 30-year period at any time, including the next day after you made the prediction. So I'm not sure if I cleared it up for you or not, but it's there. A lot of people said climate change wasn't real. Well, we sort of got that figured out now. Sea level rise is another one of these predictive tools that the federal government has put out for us to use. It appears, in my mind, to be reasonable for a lot of different reasons, so.
So just as a visual, I mean, the 0.4 meters, we're just over a foot difference in height, so there would be a transitional period position out there that could be tapered off. Some people might not understand that when they look at it, that it might look like we made a mistake building something, but no, it'd have to be tapered out, so it'd be that transitional period. And then you look at, again, when you're going back to whatever we're looking at for the facing of the wharf, the Market Wharf or the seawall, it will be able to be built for that sea level rising. So we don't have to do this massive project right now today, but this is building it for the adapter of coming on later. When you say in 10 years you do a huge revamp of the Market Square, then you can take that into account there, and the structures with actual on the outbound facing, the walls, seawalls and everything, they're taken into account for that to happen. So you're not spending all this money for 10 years if we have a huge climate issue, that everything's going to be under the next highest, a high tide we have.
Right.
And what Gord talked about is that redundant high level. And that's what's kind of failed a lot of the Market Square underneath is, you can have wave action come in and out here and there. It's not going to be really invasive to the structure. But when it's continuous wave action and it's continuously flushing out, that's when you're going to have more failure happen. So it's trying to do that prevention of, okay, yes, we're going to have high levels. We're going to have big storm surges. They're going to be spaced out enough that it's not going to hurt a lot of things. But when you get into that, when that sea level does rise and it's continuous, that's when a lot of infrastructure will continue to break down. So hopefully that kind of adds a little bit more information.
There's some great videos if you want to go online. Because when I did the research for this, but before I'd already done, when I did the research for Digby, was we looked at the Groundhog Day gale, the Saxby gale, and other occurrences like that, and they seem to occur every 60 to 70 years. These are extremes. But there's some great video of the Groundhog Day in St. Andrews, and whole areas just awash and buildings getting hammered with waves and that sort of thing. In retrospect, it's kind of interesting. For the people at the time, it probably wasn't all that great. Yeah.
Councillor Hayman?
May I have your permission to ask a second question, Your Worship? Thank you. Gord, you mentioned something about 9,000 kilogram trucks. I was paying attention, but you said that there was a way perhaps that it could be shored up enough that it would allow that. Was that I don't mean a quick fix, but what part of the construction would that be?
So the area that I'm most concerned about is this large area of concrete erosion in the surface of the inner approach road deck. And the fastest, easiest way to look after that, because the spacing between the trestles is only about 12.5 feet, is to put some steel plates down to cover that area. So it would take the load over that area. It's commonly done by contractors when they're faced with situations like that, where they have to get equipment across, but they don't have any other way to do it. So that would be the solution.
This would not interfere with the wharf being used, correct? Like it would be done.
It's about this thick, so you're
Yeah.
going to you might have to put some red paint on it,
Yeah.
or yellow paint or something, so that people won't stumble, but
Yeah.
yeah, you could still walk on it and drive on it. Yeah.
So it's just whatever the time it is to place it. So
Yeah.
a few hours,
Oh, yeah.
a morning would have it
Yeah.
replaced.
Because that's what I'm concerned about that, like as I mentioned, and you did mention it, sir, and I just didn't pick up how it was going to be done. Thank you.
Sorry, I should have been more.
No, it's just me, thank you.
And just
I
another,
just assume everybody knows. Sorry.
and then just another area that Gord talked about, weight restriction areas, is on the day adventure. So the inner portion of the
Wharf head.
that's where the columns are failing the worst. So we would talk about, I think, what was the distance you'd like to come in?
10 feet.
About 10 feet in from the leading edge, and put some kind of barrier so there's not vehicles sitting there. So like a Jersey barrier or something of that. just to prevent the vehicles from sitting there. So it just brings up the safety standards a little bit on that too as well. So.
Thank you. Councillor Weir?
Yes, you mentioned the sea level rise and putting these trestles in the inner portion. There's not, I can't envision a better time than to add, I suppose, 0.4, what's that, 15 inches to the level of that. I know there's some adversity to having a slope somewhere along the, going out to the wharf, but you're starting at the bottom, coming up. There's never going to be a better time to add.
That's why we are recommending that at this point. And what helps us there to do the work underneath is that the new slabs that go on top, you've got an 8-inch slab, and then you've got, if you can imagine, a big, long, flat slab that gets really thick at the ends. So it might be a foot thick, but at the ends it's 2 feet thick. So you're getting almost 3 feet of height. So that gives you the room underneath to put the pile bent, the horizontal piece at the top of the columns in place as soon as possible. So while the old deck is still in place. So. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So just going back to that transitional location, it is something that aesthetically, again, like I said earlier, people are going to think that it was made a mistake, but it's actually forward thinking. We always joke about the 2 train tracks that don't line up, that it would somewhat look like that. So just people understand that there is going to would be a transitional piece taken into account for that. But again, you would do it so it'd be more usable, like hard. You don't want a car bottoming out or anything like that. But I would joke that we could put a sign by it to say this is here for an engineered reason. But that's kind of the case. So there would be something like that. So just so everyone's aware that there would be a transitional piece there. It would be like a not a wheelchair access, but something similar to a ramp coming up.
Yeah, like 12 inches in
Yeah, so it's 15 inches over whatever determine to stretch it out over.
It would have to be a fair span, I think, again, to keep it. My preference would be like 4% slope or less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again,
Ideally, yeah.
not just for the vehicles, but again for pedestrians, walking, wheelchairs, things like that, to make it accessible to everyone. So.
Yeah, and that would be the big thing to think about again. Is as much as
I think instead of an engineered sign, we'll just put speed bump.
Yeah, speed bump. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
If you, Madam Mayor, if you do have any questions, probably funnel them through Chris, and because we do need a bunch of questions answered about which way you'd like to go, or are you just going to leave this the way it is, and then there'll be a greater input from a larger group that will help you form your opinions. One thing that, Chris, you mentioned already was you asked me about what surface we would have in these enlarged areas, and at this point it's all I've got, because I don't have any direction, is just a Class A compacted surface. That's what we've costed out so far. So if you wanted it, for instance, to be asphalt, that's great. Concrete pavers, whatever you like. It would be nice to know what your preference is for a finish, because what it would be used for will probably drive what surface you need. If it's something that has to be plowed in the winter, then it's probably asphalt.
So that's for Market Square and the Day Adventure.
Yeah, but specifically for the Market Square area, because the Day Adventure is a small area that right now is just crushed rock, I think.
Well,
It's not owned by the town.
It's not owned by the town.
Or it could be wooden walkways around the edge and asphalt on the side,
So that's all we do.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a mix there. Yeah. So really, the main feature, which you would see in all these options, the most amount of change is the Market Square location, because the day adventure again, even if we did decide to bump out the wall and not maybe repair whatever option on that, it's not going to be that much more. So you just implement whatever's there. So it'd be
8 or 10 feet wide.
it would look like it is today, just a little bit wider. So it's really the what that additional space you'd want to utilize for, and that's what, if it is that option. I know we do have a third option, which is just facing the existing one, but those first two options, those are what you really have to think about, envision what that space will be used for. Now, like Gord said, if it's a plowed area, asphalt's the simplest. It's not the cheapest at times, but it does allow you to change it over time. So say if you want to put asphalt down for the first couple of years till you figure out how that space is going to organically get used, then you could look at doing pavers or something like that later. But I do also know that, it doesn't also want to be aesthetically look like just an additional parking lot. So that's kind of.
No, we don't want that.
So that's something. So
I don't either. I go there all the time. I don't want it to be one.
Yeah, that's why I just want to kind of mention this, because we have thought about this. We don't want this to just be private. Gordon and I both, we own sailboats, and we come down here, and I actually just bought a mooring in the harbor too. So we do like utilizing the space too. So we have a little bit of a we're not full-time residents here, but we do understand that there is kind of, it's a main focal point of the area. So we don't want how this project will look at, we don't want it to just be total, brick and mortar. It's got to have some kind of feel to it. So that's why when Gord left it, it's just that surface. That's what kind of has to look at is, okay, if you do go with a larger section, is there going to be some kind of expansion of facilities, what you want to do with it? Gord did mention some things about the disadvantages of brick, but maybe you want to look at something to change on that. So that's something to consider as an additional cost on what's going to happen here. The farther you go out, obviously, whatever you're going to do is going to cost more. But it depends how much you're going to gain out of it too as well. So
Thank
it's
you.
just something I wanted to kind of add. So
Thank you. We have food for thought, and we have to get together and decide. So.
Yeah, so the major questions, I guess, Council, to reiterate and to confirm is, A, kind of how far, if or how far we expand Market Wharf. Right, we've kind of given three options there. The truth is, it can be anywhere between the easiest
Anything you
option and the
want.
furthest, well,
Yeah.
technically it could go all the way to Mrs.
Sure, the
Island,
client is whatever
but the
you
pricing,
want.
yeah, that's right. So it's whatever the council wants on that. I guess the sea level rise we'll have to look at. I'll have to talk to our funding partners about that a little bit, see what their take on that is.
There actually may be funds available for the sea level rise.
Well, that's what we already have.
That's what I have.
Yeah.
And so we just have to see what their definition of sea level rise protection means.
Well, and raising the market area might bring in more funds that could be used to offset the initial costs, right?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. So, I know in other areas that, well, not in this province, but in other provinces, there's pretty good contribution based on sea level rise. Some is from the feds, but a lot of it is from the provincial coffers.
Okay.
With the budgets, the way they're shaping up the next couple of years.
Yeah.
That might be asking a lot.
Things
So
are tight, yeah.
We'll get through our current funding first and look at the future, but thank you. So council, I guess maybe add this to the agenda Monday night, just for discussion. Really what we're looking for from you is maybe to accept this report as presented so we can release it to the public. And then how you'd like to do any consultation on the Market Square. It's substantially less than, and I guess, we could release the report anytime. It's really up to you folks, but if you'd like to wait till you formally adopt it, which is normally the course of business, but if you want me to put it on the site tomorrow morning, we can.
Council?
It
Oh,
doesn't
sorry.
make any difference to me, again, whether we approve it on Monday and release it or release it early if we can.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it,
I'm sure there'll be a lot of interest for people to see it, that's for sure.
Yep.
So, okay, well, then if council's okay, and the engineers are okay, did you sign this report? It's stamped, okay, it's not a draft, okay?
I
So-
should also mention that Eric Orser did a lot of work on this report too. Unfortunately, Eric broke his ankle on playing hockey.
Oh, a noble injury. then.
Yeah, on Sunday. So That's why you're only stuck with Gordon and I, and Eric can't be here because he's slightly not very mobile at the current situation. So
We really appreciate.
And are you able to give me like a real ballpark figure of cost per square meter for the top surfaces?
I can do it for asphalt, and I can probably, Market Square, St. John, they used concrete pavers, and the Glen Group did the design, all the fancy stuff, and we did all this geotech stuff underneath to support it, but I think I can probably get a unit rate for that.
That would be super.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just so we know how much,
yeah,
it's all part of the discussion in the end of the day.
Yeah, it'd be a year or two. We could probably get that. We did it 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
The
Or at least it's somewhat relevant
The
number.
surfaces you could work with would be wood walkways, directed traffic and stuff like that. Asphalt surfaces, concrete surfaces, and pavers
Yeah, well,
are the 4 different surfaces that you might put in different areas.
we talked about stamped concrete.
Concrete.
Yeah.
Is it- can it be-
Just part of, well, it'd be stamped concrete or stamped asphalt too.
Same price?
Is that the same cost?
No,
No,
concrete is always more expensive.
concrete,
Really?
more expensive.
Okay.
Oh, good to know. Okay, council.
And,
how's-
yeah, that's just for us to kind of, okay, right now, I don't know if it's $10,000, which I know it isn't, but,
Yeah,
or
so-
200,000.
We know the area of it, of
Yeah.
all 3 of those options. So asphalt's pretty straightforward for us to do, and Gordon can kind of pull some resources to get what that concrete structure would be. So at least you have some figures of this
If
much
it's of
difference.
general use, it's 2 inches of asphalt. If it's gonna be heavier usages, hauling boats or something, you need at least 3 inches. So.
But I assume when we talked about, in previous meetings, this extended area probably wouldn't be a real high traffic area. You just talked about service vehicles or anything like that, so it's, maybe you're putting some food trucks on it or certain services like that, so the 2 inches would cover for that. It's just when you get above, like a higher traffic area, like if you're gonna park fire trucks there all the time, you'd have to.
Not all the time.
Hopefully
Been there a
not.
couple of times over the
Hopefully
last
not.
couple of years.
Then you would have
20
to, so
years.
that's just something to consider. So
Yeah.
when Gordon gives you, that's kind of the general
Yeah.
purpose use of what's going on there
Yeah.
now. So that's the assumption we'll have to make with that, so.
Great. Okay, council?
So perhaps Monday night we could discuss, like some scheduling for, some open houses for the public?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay?
And just for everyone's expectations too, so once we decide, we do have to go to our funding partners because the scope has changed, and that usually has to be elevated to Ottawa. It's Infrastructure Canada who has to approve that. The last scope change took 3 or 4 months, I think. So chances of spring work are probably almost nil. So as long as it's not major, it's probably stuff we could start in the fall, maybe.
I think some of the
Late
main,
summer, fall.
Late summer.
Definitely.
Schedule anyway.
Of course, you said that wouldn't shut down the wharf anyway,
No, the
okay,
structural
so,
jackets won't, and the trestle work won't shut down. As long as we can get it in the fall before you get into some really cold weather, say December,
Okay.
end of November, you can probably work it up to the December.
which,
so, oops, sorry, just was going to say, Councilor, just for a second, that we do need council's decisions because we got to put together kind of our final ask, and so there's multiple options for anyone who grabs a report. There's multiple options in each of these tables. Don't add up the whole column because there's kind of choose one of 2 in 2 or 3 places. And so we want to be able to get those down to, this is our moving forward plan. So the engineers know what they're designing and our funding partners know what they're funding.
so yeah, with the jackets, with the, supporting the jackets, you're just using the floating wharf structure, so a lot of that, and maybe a little bit of the top structure on that one. So, when you're looking later in the season, it might be better to do it. I mean, obviously, you want to get going on this right away, but that work could probably still be done in this calendar year, so.
Well, and I guess the question is from logistics, would you want to combine the projects or would you do the end work separately and do the structural work on a separate?
I would put big emphasis on fixing the head of the wharf, those piles.
Which could be done over the summer.
That could be done over the summer. It would be maybe a little tricky working around the day adventure groups, but maybe they could be loaded on the front of the wharf from the other gangway. I don't know, but they would, you know, if there was construction going on there, it would probably get in the way of the Day Adventure gangway area.
Because they run tours fairly often out of that area, so it'd be hard to kind of work in between, so you might have to.
Be impossible, to be honest, the traffic set, so they park every.
Yeah, I was trying to be a little bit
everywhere.
optimistic,
I know,
but
but
yeah.
we'd have to shut the area down,
Yeah.
essentially, to get any bigger trucks down there, so.
But not even just trucks, just even on the floating wharf, just working in there, you know, putting the jackets on, doing any of that maintenance. It's not that big of a gangway, so basically their workspace is gonna be a majority of that floating wharf area on the inbound section of the wharf. So that's just
So
something.
the jackets would be one type of contractor. There's a few of them that can do it. Mel Young, Tim Flood are the two that come top of mind to me. They have the experience to do it right. And the trestle work, it could be, again, either of those contractors, Harbor Town Builders, you know, there's local people that can do this.
After working on the Algonquin project all winter, they may think twice about working through the winter again, but nonetheless, God bless them. But nonetheless, no, I appreciate that, and I think local would be preferable, at least from a costing perspective, for sure. Sorry, Councillor Ware, I think I cut you off earlier.
Councillor Ware?
Did I cut you off, Councillor? Oh,
No.
okay, sorry.
Okay. Anything else?
There is some time required to do the design too, so, sorry. There is some time required to do the design. I don't know if you could, you know, start the design while you're going for your funding application or not. That might be a risk, maybe you don't want to take, but that would be one way to also move the whole timetable up a bit, so.
Okay.
We'll talk, I'll pass along,
Sure.
I've got concerns that we may, because if we wait till the fall to do the under work, is that doable?
No, well, if we get it, all the concrete poured before the end of November.
Not for the
it's
decking
doable.
though, but just for
No,
the,
just the stuff underneath, yeah. But you need to leave enough time to do it, because the more you hurry it, the more expensive it gets.
yep.
The expensive time to construct something is in the fall, when contractors don't have any time left to get the work done, and they have all these multiple jobs they're doing. So the cheapest time to construct anything is in the early summer.
So I guess we'll see how the funding, well, how fast council and the community provides a decision. I guess the thing we have to know, I can just, and I'm not saying this is what we do, but I can see where the trestle work happens actually in year 2,
It could.
and the decking happens in year 3, just because I think we're gonna run out of time this year. Is my
Or-
concern, because it's just by the time we get all our ducks in a row, the season's gonna be upon us.
Right, or you do the trestle work in the early part of the summer, and then after the season is over,
Is your mic on?
yeah, sorry, it
Yeah.
is.
He's leaning back a little bit.
And so after, if you did the trestle work next year, in the early part of the year, as soon as you could get going, when you could pour concrete, you could do that at the first of the summer, and then when your season ends, try and get all of the decking done before Christmas, before things get too cold. Or you might even get the panels in place in the late fall, winter time period, and then you'll have to wait until the spring you'd have limited access, you know, across those panels, but it'd be walking access, I think, so.
Yeah, you might want to, if you're just going to leave the panels without the top surface on it, you potentially might want to put a barrier of some sort, like the steel plates down again or something, just to
Yep.
look at it. But yes, potentially you could do it all in one calendar year. Like, say if you get the funding and everything, and you hit the ground running at, you know, February of next year, then you could revisit it in the fall after peak season. But again, depending on, still this fall, with even the repairs of the jacket repairs or the cross bracing on the outer approach, those are something that could technically get done this year, even if it was into the fall a little bit. Just as long as the concrete work was, if it's a jacket repairs, you really have to put an emphasis that would have to be completed quite early on in November before you start getting into a lot of other issues. So but the cross bracing repair,
Anytime.
that could be done really, yeah, anytime. So there's things that could be keep moving. And then the other thing too is the precast panels, once the design's done, everything's figured out, they can be done anytime because they're going to be done in a facility somewhere. So they're not really to schedules or anything because they're going to be done offsite inside, a place like StressCon, just saying them. So they can be done at any time and be ready. And that's something you might want to consider is maybe having those done. So then whenever your calendar works to place them, you're not waiting on them being created. They're already done somewhere. So it's a little bit of front end loaded again, but it's just something to consider that, if you can move and go, then you have them. You're not waiting for them to be created. So
Yeah, thank you.
We'll find out what the time, the pre-order time is. We get some
Yeah.
idea of pre-order time. That would be all part of the lexicon of trying to predict.
Okay. So,
And thank you for feeding us. That was very, very
a little bit of a bonus. So yeah, thank you very much.
well, thank you for coming. We
proper
appreciate
maritime way.
it. Yeah, we thank you. We
Okay.
thank you
Okay,
very
we'll leave you
much
to it.
for you coming out tonight.
Drive careful on your way home.
Yes,
Yeah, I think we're hope for the best.
yeah. I don't know if it's snowing or not out there, but drive carefully.
It's not enough to worry
So we
about.
appreciate everything. Okay, so, yeah. So we're up to F, introduction, consideration, and passing of bylaws and motions. There are none. New business, there is none. Question period. I don't see anybody left. They all left. Oh, sorry, Natalie's hiding in the corner. Any questions? No? Okay. What? Online? Any questions, Mac, from online? Or Mr. Spear? I'm not sure. Thanks again, guys.
Doesn't look like anyone is responding at this time.
Okay, thank you. So that's done. Counselor and Deputy Mayor's comments? Nothing? Okay, and Mayor's comments? I think this was a very informative and great presentation, so I look forward to the next steps. Do we have a closed session? We do. Okay. So we will there's no clock up there. So at 6:29, thank you, Councillor Bennett. We are going to go into closed session per the Local Governance Acts, Section 68(1)D, the proposed, thanks again, the proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land. So we'll give night, Natalie, and for Flo to come over to the back, and then we'll start.
We need to move in second.
We need a mover, Councillor Bennett, and a seconder, Councillor Heenan. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, carried. So we'll give them a few minutes to disband, and then we'll start into our closed session. Thank you, Council.